in history is the great Frederick Douglass. He said shortly after the slaves were freed, quote, "In a composite nation like ours, as before the law, there should be no rich, no poor, no high, no low, no white, no black, but common country, common citizenship, equal rights, and a common destiny." This marvelous statement was made more than 100 years ago. It's an ideal worth striving for, and one that we still strive for. We haven't reached this goal yet, but certainly in this great country of ours, we're trying. This man is an unspeakable disgrace. He's been unmasked for the whole world for what he is, and that's hopefully positive. His misdeeds go far beyond this case because he bespeaks a culture that's not tolerable in America. But let's talk about this case. People worry about this is not the case of Mark Fuhrman. Well, it's not the case of Mark Fuhrman. Mark Fuhrman is not in custody. He's not. That's the man who they're trying to put away with witnesses like this, a corrupt police officer who is a liar and a perjurer. You know, they were talking yesterday in their argument about, well, they said, well, gee, would you just think he would commit a felony? What do you think it was when he was asked the questions by F. Lee Bailey, so well put? And we'll talk about that at the very end, about whether he'd ever used the N-word in 10 years. And he swore to tell the truth. And he lied. And others knew he lied. But what I find particularly troubling is that they all knew about Mark Fuhrman. And they weren't going to tell you. They tried to ease him by. Of all the witnesses who've testified in this case, how many were taken up to the grand jury room where they have this prep session? They ask him all these questions. Ms. Clark, and I went back and I read again her introduction of Mark Fuhrman. How many witnesses did they do that with? Well, they took him up there and they prepared him for this because, you see, they knew about the Kathleen Bell letter, but she didn't fit. She didn't fit in what they wanted. They didn't want her. They'd rather malign her and believe this lying police officer. So they knew. Make no mistake about it. And so, when they try to prepare him, talk to him, and get him ready, and make him seem like a choir boy, make him come in here and raise his right hand as though he's going to tell you the truth and give you a true story here. He knew he was a liar and a racist. There's something about good versus evil. There's something about truth. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. You can always count on that. And so when Miss Clark so gently puts him on the stand and talks to him about, tell us how you feel about testifying today. Nervous? Okay. Reluctant? And all the things about this bad lady, Kathleen Bell. They brought it out at the beginning. This bad Kathleen Bell saying all these mean things about you. Oh, and you don't know her even, do you? We asked you to look at her on the Larry King show, and you didn't recognize her. You don't know her. Oh, well, it's just terrible all these bad things are happening to you, Detective Fuhrman. Go back and you look at your notes of how the testimony was as they tried to bring him in here and pass him off. These things were all happening. Kathleen Bell letter was in 85 and 86. Same time he went out to O.J. Simpson's house in 85. They want to talk so much about. What they're talking about is not even relevant. What we're talking about now is what happened in this case. And so, after having made all these denials and been adopted and accepted by the prosecution and put him on the stand, and you saw it. It was sickening. And then my colleague Lee Bailey, who can't be with us today, but God bless him wherever he is, did his cross-examination of this individual. And he asked some interesting questions. Some of you probably wonder, well, gee, wonder why he's asking that. He asked this man whether or not he'd ever met Kathleen Bell. course, he lied about that. Never met this woman. I don't recognize her. I don't know her. Gee, I don't know anything about that. Boy, and he sounded really convincing, didn't he? He says, quote, I do not recognize this woman as anybody I have ever met. That's what he says. Then Bailey says, have you used that word, referring to the N-word, in the past 10 years? Not that I recall, no. You mean if you call someone a nigger, you have forgotten it? I'm not sure I can answer the question the way it's phrased, sir. And they go on. He says, Bailey then pins him down. I want you to assume that perhaps at some time since 1985 or 86, you addressed a member of the African American race as a nigger. Is it possible that you have forgotten that act on your part? Answer, no, it is not possible. Are you therefore saying that you have not used that word in the past 10 years, Detective Furman? Answer, yes, that is what I'm saying. Question, and you say under oath that you have not addressed any black person as a nigger or spoken about black people as niggers in the past 10 years, Detective Furman? That's what I'm saying, sir. So that anyone who comes to this court and quotes you as using that word in dealing with African Americans would be a liar. Would they not, Detective Furman? Yes, they would. All of them? Correct? All of them. That's what he told you under oath in this case. Did he lie? Did he lie? Did he lie under oath? Did this key prosecution witness lie under oath? And I'm going to end this part and resume with him tomorrow morning. Did he lie? And when they try to tell you he's not important, let's remember this man. This is the man who was off this case shortly after 2 o'clock in the morning, right after he got on it. This is the man who didn't want to be off this case. This is the man, when they're ringing the doorbell at Ashford, who goes for a walk, and he describes how he's strolling. Let me quote him for you. Here's what he says. I was just strolling along, looking at the house. Maybe I could see some movement inside. I was just walking while the other 3 detectives were down there. And that's when he walks down, and he's the one who says the Bronco was parked askew, and he sees some spot on the door. He makes all of the discoveries. It's got to be the big man, because he's had it in for O.J. because of his views since '85. This is the man. He's the guy who climbs over the fence. He's the guy who goes in and talks to Cato Kalin while the other detectives are talking to the family. He's the guy who's shining a light in Cato Kalin's eyes. He's the guy looking at shoes and looking for suspects. He's the guy who's doing these things. He's the guy who says, I don't tell anybody about the thumps on the wall. He's the guy who's off this case, who's supposedly there to help this man, our client, O.J. Simpson, who then goes out all by himself. All by himself. Now, if he's worried about bodies or suspects or whatever, doesn't even take out his gun. He goes around the side of the house, and lo and behold, he claims he finds this glove. And he says the glove is still moist and sticky. Now, under their theory, at 10:40, 10:45, that glove is dropped. How many hours is that? It's now after 6 o'clock. So what is that, 7.5 hours? It's a testimony about drying time around here. There's no dew point that night. Why would it be moist and sticky? Unless he brought it over there and planted it there to try to make this case. And there is a Caucasian hair on that glove. This man cannot be trusted. He is central to the prosecution. And for them to say he's not important is untrue, and you will not fall for it. Because as guardians of justice here, you can't let it happen. We'll see you tomorrow.